when we were doing the scene, I was being aggressive when I was like, yo, you got, but this is character to character.
Long before LL Cool J was a beloved actor on television, he was hip-hop's shining example of raw swagger, a rapper who built his empire on confidence, authenticity, and lyrical dominance. But in the late 1980s, one man stood on the opposite end of that spectrum, MC Hammer. Polished, flashy, and commercially explosive, Hammer embodied everything LL believed hip-hop was not supposed to be. And when these two titans collided, it wasn't just about music. It was about identity, respect, and what it truly meant to represent the streets. And at that time, LL Cool J was riding high on the success of albums like Bigger and Deffer and Walking with a Panther. He was young, brash, and hungry, the kind of artist who saw every hit single by another rapper as a direct challenge. Hammer, on the other hand, was breaking records with Let's Get It Started and Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em. His sequin pants, dance routines, and catchy hooks made him a global phenomenon. To casual fans, Hammer looked like the future. To LL, he looked like a sellout. And it all began when MC Hammer casually mentioned LL Cool J in Let's Get It Started, not even as an insult, but as a passing reference among hip-hop's elite. Yet LL didn't take it lightly. To him, it was as if Hammer had stepped onto sacred ground without permission. LL had built his name through lyrical warfare and street credibility, while Hammer seemed to be building his through television appearances and Pepsi commercials. The two represented opposite poles of hip-hop's growing identity crisis. Art versus entertainment, the streets versus the stage. NSO in 1990, LL Cool J struck back. His track To the Break of Dawn wasn't just a diss, it was a declaration. LL didn't hold back, mocking Hammer's shiny outfits, commercial success, and lack of street roots. "You ain't hard," LL sneered through the mic, his voice dripping with venom. It was one of those moments where the entire rap world leaned in, eager to see how Hammer would respond. Hammer, for his part, didn't take the bait, at least not directly. He was already selling millions of records and performing on world tours. His response wasn't in a song, but in silence, and in success. While LL prided himself on lyrical credibility, Hammer became one of the first rappers to achieve true mainstream superstardom. That success drove LL crazy. To him, it felt like the world was rewarding someone who didn't live by hip-hop's unwritten rules, who didn't earn the stripes. LL believed every real rapper should. Behind the scenes, their camps traded words. Industry insiders recall heated conversations, near confrontations at award shows, and a general sense that these two giants would never share the same stage. LL was vocal in interviews, describing Hammer's style as circus rap. Hammer, meanwhile, brushed it off publicly but privately felt disrespected. After all, he wasn't trying to be LL, he was trying to expand hip-hop's reach, to show it could fill stadiums and sell out arenas. NTHE irony was that both men were right in their own way. LL's fight for authenticity preserved hip-hop's soul, ensuring it didn't become too sanitized or corporate. Hammer's success proved that hip-hop could thrive commercially without losing its essence. But in that moment, neither man could see the bigger picture. What they saw instead was a mirror, each reflecting the other's insecurities. LL feared that hip-hop's new direction would erase the raw edge he'd built his career on. Hammer feared that no matter how successful he became, the purists like LL would never respect him. Their feud wasn't just about words, it was about belonging. NBY, the mid-1990s, the tension cooled as the industry shifted toward gangster rap and new voices emerged. But the echoes of that rivalry never fully disappeared. In later interviews, LL admitted he had been young and defensive, while Hammer acknowledged LL's talent and influence. Time softened the bitterness, but fans still look back on their clash as one of the most symbolic feuds in hip-hop history, the moment when art and commerce collided headfirst. In hindsight, the LL Cool J versus MC Hammer feud wasn't just two rappers throwing shade. It was a cultural battle for hip-hop's identity between the streets that birthed it and the spotlight that threatened to change it. LL may have won the lyrical war, but Hammer won the world's attention. And somewhere between those victories, hip-hop learned an important truth. Even legends can be divided by what success means. And in the end, LL Cool J walked away with his pride intact and Hammer with his empire built. But that rivalry left behind a scar, a reminder that in the world of hip-hop, fame might be golden, but respect, that's priceless. By 1999, LL Cool J had successfully crossed over from hip-hop royalty to Hollywood heavyweight. His charisma, discipline, and physical intensity made him the kind of star directors wanted when a role called for raw energy. That same year, he joined an all-star cast in Oliver Stone's Any Given Sunday, a gritty football drama filled with testosterone, ego, and ambition. But what no one expected was that the film would give birth to one of Hollywood's most explosive on-set feuds, LL Cool J versus Jamie Foxx. It began innocently enough. Both men were playing football players. Fierce, passionate, and physically dominant. LL's character, Julian Washington, was a veteran athlete, proud and intimidating. Jamie Foxx played Willie Beeman, the brash newcomer, stealing the spotlight. Art mirrored life. Off-screen, Jamie was the rising star, transitioning from comedy into serious acting, while LL was already a respected celebrity with years of fame behind him. From the first day on set, their dynamic carried an undercurrent of competition. Quiet at first, but ready to erupt. NTHE breaking point came during the filming of a particularly intense scene. LL's character was supposed to rough up Jamie's, a physical confrontation meant to showcase the tension between old and new. But when the cameras rolled, things got too real. According to witnesses, LL threw an elbow that connected harder than planned. Jamie, caught off guard and furious, retaliated with a punch. Not a staged one, but a real swing that landed. Within seconds, the set descended into chaos. The two men were no longer acting. They were fighting. Crew members rushed in to pull them apart as Oliver Stone shouted for calm. Jamie's lip was split. LL's pride was bruised. And the incident instantly became Hollywood gossip. Two alpha males, two egos, and one unforgettable clash. And afterward, the atmosphere on set turned icy. The cast was divided. Some sided with Jamie, claiming LL had taken things too far, while others said Jamie disrespected LL's professionalism by reacting violently. LL maintained that he was just staying in character. Jamie, on the other hand, told interviewers that LL's aggression was personal, not artistic. "He hit me," Jamie later said bluntly, "so I hit him back." NTHE tension didn't end there. Rumors swirled that LL showed up to set with bodyguards, that Jamie refused to rehearse scenes with him, and that the two had to be filmed separately for the remainder of the movie. Oliver Stone, known for his chaotic filmmaking style, reportedly loved the raw animosity between them. It added authenticity to the final product. But for the actors, it left lasting scars. When the movie premiered, their chemistry was undeniable. Ironically, the same hostility that caused chaos on set gave their scenes explosive realism. Fans could feel the tension, every glare, every shove, every sneer. It was no longer acting. It was real emotion captured on film. And afterward, both men downplayed the feud publicly, but insiders knew the bad blood ran deep. They never worked together again. LL moved on to more acting roles and albums, while Jamie went on to win an Oscar just a few years later. But whenever Any Given Sunday is mentioned, that infamous fight always resurfaces, a reminder of how two brilliant performers let pride turn passion into violence. Years later, both stars matured enough to look back with perspective. LL called it a misunderstanding that got out of hand, while Jamie admitted that they were two young men with big egos. Still, despite the apologies, they never fully reconciled. The wound may have closed, but the scar remained visible, proof that even in the glamorous world of Hollywood, tempers can flare and reputations can collide. In FORLL Cool J, the Jamie Foxx incident wasn't just another headline. It was a moment that tested his composure, his professionalism, and his pride. It revealed a side of him the world rarely saw. Not the smooth, unbothered superstar, but the man behind the cool, competitive, fiery, and unwilling to back down. When LL Cool J first signed to Def Jam in the mid-1980s, the label was hip-hop's heartbeat. It was where legends were born and empires began. LL wasn't just another artist on the roster. He was the face of Def Jam, the young prodigy who helped shape its golden era. But fast forward 2 decades, and the label that once treated him like royalty was under new leadership, a leadership that changed everything. When Jay-Z became president of Def Jam in 2004, the stage was set for one of the most subtle yet deeply personal rivalries in hip-hop history. And at first glance, it should have been a dream pairing. two icons from different eras, each representing excellence in his own right. Jay-Z, the self-made mogul, redefining what it meant to be a rapper in the corporate world. LL Cool J, the veteran legend who paved the way for stars like him. But the relationship quickly soured, not from an explosive incident, but from a slow, silent erosion of respect. NLL had been loyal to Def Jam for nearly 2 decades, delivering hit after hit, Mama Said Knock You Out, phenomenon Mr. Smith. He was the label's cornerstone, the artist who never left even when others did. But when Jay-Z took the reins as president, LL began to feel invisible. Suddenly the spotlight shifted to younger, fresher artists like Rihanna, Ne-Yo, and Kanye West. LL didn't see growth. He saw replacement. During interviews, LL tried to stay diplomatic, but his frustration was hard to hide. He openly questioned whether Jay-Z, a fellow rapper, could ever fairly lead other rappers. "How can you be the boss and a competitor at the same time?" he once asked. It was a question that hit deep. LL wasn't just accusing Jay of favoritism. He was calling out what he saw as betrayal. NJAYZ, ever the strategist, kept quiet. He didn't respond publicly, didn't throw lyrical jabs, didn't give the feud the oxygen it needed to grow. But that silence only made LL angrier. To LL, silence wasn't professionalism, it was arrogance. It was as if Jay was saying, "I'm above this." When LL released his 2006 album Todd Smith under Jay-Z's presidency, he expected a full promotional push. Instead, he felt the label barely lifted a finger. Sales underperformed, and LL made his disappointment public, accusing Def Jam of not doing its job. A year later, he released Exit 13, his final album with the label, and the title said it all. It was his way of walking out the door with dignity, signaling the end of an era that began with triumph and ended with quiet resentment. Behind the scenes, industry insiders whispered that LL felt disrespected, not because of money, but because of legacy. He wanted the label to treat him as a legend, not as an outdated name on a spreadsheet. Jay, meanwhile, was focused on the future, building a new Def Jam that appealed to the next generation. To him, LL represented the past. To LL, Jay represented the betrayal of tradition. Their dynamic reflected something deeper, a generational clash within hip-hop itself. LL came from a time when artists fought tooth and nail for respect, where every bar was a battlefield. Jay-Z came from an era where hip-hop had become a billion-dollar business, where power wasn't just in rhymes but in ownership. They were both right, both wrong, and both too proud to meet in the middle. In later years, the tension simmered down but never truly disappeared. When LL was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2021, Jay-Z congratulated him publicly, calling him one of the pioneers who laid the foundation for all of us. LL smiled, thanked him, but sharp-eyed fans noticed the compliment felt formal, polite, not personal. Then, during one of LL's live shows a year later, he made comments that reignited the whispers. Without naming names, he took shots at rappers turned executives who forgot where they came from and started acting like CEOs instead of MCs. The audience roared. They knew exactly who he was talking about. NFORLL Cool J. The Jay-Z feud was never about envy. It was about recognition. It was about a man who helped build hip-hop feeling sidelined by the very culture he helped create. For Jay-Z, it was business evolution, not betrayal. But in the emotional world of hip-hop, where every slight feels personal, those differences mattered. Looking back, their quiet, cold war represents a deeper truth about fame. Even legends crave validation. Even kings want acknowledgement. LL Cool J wasn't afraid to demand respect, even from another king. And Jay-Z, ever the businessman, kept moving forward, understanding that the crown of hip-hop doesn't fit two heads at once. In the end, their feud didn't end with diss tracks or public fights. It ended with distance. Two icons, two eras, and one invisible line drawn between them. LL Cool J may have left Def Jam, but he took something with him that Jay-Z could never replace. The soul of an era where pride, loyalty, and respect meant more than charts or checks. Before LL Cool J became the face of 1980s hip-hop swagger, there was another man who ruled the microphone with precision and pride, Kool Moe Dee. He was the polished wordsmith, the battle-tested MC who brought intellect to the streets and believed rap was an art form meant to educate, not just entertain. But when a young LL Cool J came crashing into the scene with his brash confidence and gold chains, Kool Moe Dee saw more than just a rising star. He saw a threat, a loud, cocky teenager who disrespected the culture's roots. And from that spark, one of rap's most legendary feuds was born. And it began, as most hip-hop wars do, with attitude. In 1984, LL Cool J was still a hungry kid out of Queens, spitting with the energy of someone who believed he was destined to be the greatest. His early hits like I Can't Live Without My Radio and Rock the Bells were bold, aggressive, and unapologetic. But to the old guard, pioneers like Kool Moe Dee, Mella Mel, and Busy Bee, LL's arrogance was unbearable. They had built the foundation of hip-hop through parties, park battles, and lyrical discipline, not through MTV exposure or record deals. LL, to them, was too polished, too commercial, too quick to call himself a legend before earning it. And Kool Moe Dee didn't hold back. In interviews, he called LL disrespectful, accusing him of borrowing from his style without giving credit. He even claimed LL had stolen his onstage persona. The swagger, the shades, the cool composure. LL, never one to shy away from confrontation, fired back the only way he knew how, through music. NHI's 1987 track Jack the Ripper didn't name Kool Moe Dee directly, but the shots were clear. LL mocked the old-school cats who couldn't keep up with his rhymes, claiming their time was over. How You Like Me Now? Moe Dee's hit from that same year was a direct response, a taunt, a challenge, and a declaration that the old school wasn't backing down. The two rappers had drawn battle lines, and the entire hip-hop community watched as a generational war unfolded. NLL escalated things further with To the Break of Dawn in 1990, one of the most infamous diss tracks in rap history. This time, he didn't bother with subtlety. He name-dropped Kool Moe Dee outright, calling him old, played out, and jealous. LL's tone was surgical, precise, confident, and merciless. For him, this wasn't just a lyrical battle. It was about proving that he was the new king, and the old regime had to step aside. Kool Moe Dee, a man who prided himself on lyrical complexity, refused to let LL have the last word. He responded with Let's Go, a carefully constructed verbal assault that dissected LL's bravado piece by piece. Moe Dee accused LL of being a studio gangster, a performer who played tough on records but lacked authenticity in the streets. It wasn't just an insult, it was a question of legitimacy, of who truly represented the voice of hip-hop's foundation. What made this feud so compelling wasn't just the words, it was what they represented. LL Cool J symbolized the future of rap: slick production, crossover appeal, and mainstream fame. Kool Moe Dee embodied the roots: respect, lyricism, and cultural purity. Their battle was more than personal. It was philosophical. NFOR years, fans debated who won. LL had the hits, the fame, and the youthful energy that defined the new era. Moe Dee had the technical skill and the moral high ground of a pioneer defending his craft. But as hip-hop evolved into the 90s, it was clear that the torch had passed. LL became a global superstar, while Kool Moe Dee's influence began to fade into the pages of history, respected but no longer relevant to the MTV generation. Still, both men understood, in their own way, that their clash had changed hip-hop forever. Without their rivalry, there would be no blueprint for the lyrical wars that followed. Nas versus Jay-Z, Tupac versus Biggie, Drake versus Pusha T. They had proven that rap wasn't just music, it was competition, theater, and legacy all rolled into one. Years later, in interviews, LL spoke about Moe Dee with a tone of mixed respect and amusement. "He came at me hard," LL admitted, "but he kept me sharp." Kool Moe Dee too softened with time, calling LL one of the greatest to ever do it. There was no handshake, no formal reconciliation, just the quiet understanding between two gladiators who had shared the same arena. NTHE feud between LL Cool J and Kool Moe Dee remains one of hip-hop's defining moments, a lyrical duel that mirrored the genre's growing pains. It was the sound of tradition meeting ambition, of wisdom clashing with hunger. And though LL ultimately emerged as the face of modern hip-hop, he did so standing on the battlefield that Kool Moe Dee helped build. And in the end, they both won, because without that fire, that need to prove themselves, neither man would have become immortal. Their rivalry wasn't just about who was better. It was about who could define the meaning of real hip-hop. And for a few unforgettable years, both of them did. By the late 1980s, hip-hop had evolved into something far more layered than anyone had expected. It wasn't just beats and rhymes anymore. It was identity, politics, and rebellion. And within that new world stood two men who represented opposite ends of the culture's growing spectrum. LL Cool J, the smooth-talking showman with crossover appeal, and Ice-T, the street poet who painted the world in raw, unfiltered realism. Their feud was never about direct insults or brawls. It was about ideology. Two men, two visions of hip-hop, and one question: what should rap stand for? When LL Cool J burst onto the scene in the mid-'80s, he became the face of youthful confidence, all Kangol hats, gold chains, and self-assured bravado. His music, while rooted in the streets, carried polish and accessibility that made him one of the first rappers to truly cross into the mainstream. But to Ice-T, the gritty storyteller from South Central Los Angeles, that polish looked like compromise. He believed rap's duty was to reflect reality, not to sell fantasies. LL's image, in his eyes, represented the commercialization of something that was supposed to belong to the people. Their tension began subtly. Around 1988, Ice-T released I'm Your Pusher, a song that cleverly used the metaphor of drugs to describe the addictive power of music. But fans and critics alike noticed lines that seemed to take shots at rappers like LL, accusing them of promoting materialism and artificiality. Ice-T denied it was personal, saying it was about the culture, not the man. But LL took note. He didn't appreciate being grouped with those seen as sellouts, and to him, the message felt like a veiled insult. And LL's response came 2 years later with To the Break of Dawn, the same record that took aim at Kool Moe Dee and MC Hammer. Without ever naming Ice-T directly, LL fired subliminal shots about rappers talking that gangsta stuff while secretly craving fame and fortune. It was enough to stoke the fire. Hip-hop insiders knew who he was talking about. The rivalry had become official, quiet, cold, and deeply rooted in mutual pride. Ice-T's reaction was classic Ice-T, calm, sharp, and cutting. In interviews, he brushed off LL's words, but made it clear that he didn't respect rappers who built their careers on image rather than authenticity. LL's a star, he said once, but I'm not trying to be a star, I'm trying to be real. It was the perfect encapsulation of their divide. LL wanted to dominate the charts. Ice-T wanted to document the streets. The contrast between them was almost cinematic. LL wore designer clothes and smiled on magazine covers. Ice-T wore all black and rapped about crime, corruption, and police brutality. LL's songs made you dance. Ice-T's made you think. And yet, beneath the tension, there was a strange kind of respect. Both men were pioneers in their own lanes, both unafraid to defend what they believed hip-hop should be. NFOR fans. Their rivalry wasn't about hate. It was about philosophy. LL represented evolution, the belief that hip-hop could be entertainment, a business, a brand. Ice-T stood for preservation, the belief that rap was sacred, a voice for the voiceless. Their conflict wasn't destructive, it was defining. It forced the genre to confront a question it still struggles with today. Can hip-hop stay real while also going mainstream? In later years, the two men crossed paths numerous times at award shows and industry events. The energy between them was tense but civil, that unspoken recognition between two alpha figures who didn't need to prove themselves anymore. Over time, the Cold War thawed. By the early 2000s, both had evolved beyond the feud entirely. LL was conquering television with NCIS Los Angeles, while Ice-T had reinvented himself as the tough but wise Detective Finn on Law & Order SVU. Ironically, both had become mainstream icons, proof that authenticity and fame didn't have to be enemies after all. When asked years later about LL, Ice-T gave an answer that surprised everyone. "I respect LL. He's always been dope. We just came from different schools of thought." LL, too, eventually extended an olive branch. In interviews, he credited Ice-T for staying true to himself and never folding under pressure. It was mutual admiration born from maturity. Two former rivals realizing that their differences had pushed each other to be better. In retrospect, Their feud feels almost prophetic. The battle between realness and commercial success continues to shape hip-hop today. LL and Ice-T lived that struggle before anyone else. Two men fighting for the soul of a genre that was still finding itself. Their clash didn't destroy either of them, it refined them. It showed the world that hip-hop could contain multitudes, style and substance, flash and truth. NSO. While their rivalry never made the tabloids or inspired direct diss tracks, it left something far more lasting: perspective. LL Cool J and Ice-T taught hip-hop that authenticity isn't one-size-fits-all. Some fight for truth in the streets, others fight for truth in success. And when you look at both of them today, legends who survived the game, outlasted their critics, and evolved without apology, you realize that maybe they weren't enemies after all. They were two sides of the same coin, defining what real really means. By the late 1990s, LL Cool J had already conquered nearly every corner of entertainment. Platinum records, hit films, chart-topping singles, and a reputation as one of hip-hop's most enduring icons. But with success came scrutiny, and nowhere was that more evident than in his feud with one of the most unexpected names in his story, Wyclef Jean. Theirs wasn't the typical rap beef fueled by disses and direct shots. It was something subtler, a clash of trust, betrayal, and unspoken loyalty that rippled through one of hip-hop's most heated rivalries. And it all started with another rapper, a newcomer named Cannabis. In 1997, LL Cool J invited Cannabis, DMX, Method Man, and Redman to collaborate on a track called 4, 3, 2, 1. At the time, Cannabis was a rising star, known for his sharp lyricism and fearless confidence. During the recording, he referenced LL's famous microphone tattoo on his arm, rapping a line that paid homage rather than insult. But LL didn't take it that way. He saw the lyric as a challenge, a violation of his image, as though this young upstart was trying to claim a piece of his legacy. LL quietly rewrote his verse before the song's release, turning it into a series of subliminal disses aimed directly at Cannabis. The young rapper, blindsided, felt betrayed, and that's when Wyclef Jean, already a global star from the Fugees, entered the picture. Wyclef decided to take Cannabis under his wing, producing his response track. The now legendary second-round KONTHAT decision changed everything. LL Cool J saw it not as a business move, but as a personal betrayal. Wyclef wasn't just another producer. He was a respected figure in the hip-hop community, a man who had worked with both veterans and newcomers alike. To LL, Wyclef's choice to produce a track that directly attacked him was a declaration of war. He knew what he was doing, LL reportedly told friends at the time. You don't produce a diss record about somebody you respect. Second-round KO hit like an earthquake. Cannabis's verses were fierce, calculated, and scathing, accusing LL of being insecure, controlling, and past his prime. But what made the record unforgettable was the production. Wyclef's cinematic soundscape, complete with sampled roars, dramatic drums, and an eerie Mike Tyson voiceover saying, "You're scared, coward." It wasn't just a diss track, it was a spectacle, and it stung. LL responded with The Ripper Strikes Back, a brutal return fire aimed at both Cannabis and, indirectly, Wyclef. LL's flow was venomous, his tone dismissive. Wyclef, open your eyes. Another rapper dead. It was his way of saying, you picked the wrong side. Fans and critics debated who won, but behind the scenes, the real damage had already been done. NFORLL Cool J. This wasn't just about lyrics, it was about trust. He had come up in an era when loyalty was sacred, when you didn't stand beside someone who was coming for your head. Wyclef, however, came from a different mindset. To him, hip-hop was competition, and art was freedom. Producing a diss track wasn't betrayal, it was business. In interviews, Wyclef defended his choice, saying, "It's hip-hop, man. It's just music. I got love for LL." And BUTLL didn't buy it. For years, he avoided speaking about Wyclef, refusing to even acknowledge the collaboration that started the feud. Insiders claimed that LL held onto that grudge quietly, storing it in the same mental vault where he kept every slight, every rivalry, every bruise to his pride. It wasn't hatred, it was disappointment. NTHE feud simmered for years. Even after the Cannabis battle faded from the headlines, LL and Wyclef never collaborated, never appeared together, and never publicly reconciled. Yet, fate has a strange way of forcing closure. In 2000, at Big Pun's funeral, the two men crossed paths unexpectedly. Surrounded by grief, industry peers, and the weight of mortality, they shook hands. It wasn't a warm embrace, more of a silent nod, an acknowledgement that life was bigger than old grudges. NTHAT moment didn't erase what happened, but it ended the Cold War quietly. Both men moved forward. Wyclef continued producing and advocating for unity in hip-hop, while LL doubled down on his acting career and continued evolving into the elder statesman of rap. But among those who lived through that era, the tension between them remained a symbol, a reminder of how loyalty, ego, and pride can tangle even the most accomplished men. Looking back now, the LL Cool J Wyclef Jean feud seems almost poetic. It wasn't about money or status. It was about principle, about how two artists with vastly different philosophies interpreted respect. Wyclef saw hip-hop as a battlefield where creativity had no allegiance. LL saw it as a brotherhood built on unspoken codes. Both were right in their own ways, but their truths couldn't coexist. In the end, LL Cool J walked away with his pride intact, and Wyclef with his reputation as one of the game's boldest producers. Their clash wasn't loud, but it echoed. Because beneath all the fame, the Grammys, and the accolades, there's one thing that even legends can't escape: the sting of betrayal, especially when it comes from someone you once considered an ally. If there was one feud in LL Cool J's career that blurred the line between professional tension and personal sting, it was his silent fallout with Foxy Brown. Unlike his other disputes that began in studios or interviews, this one was born from something deeper, a sense of betrayal that mixed pride, gender politics, and broken trust inside the ruthless machinery of late 90s hip-hop. In 1997, Foxy Brown was at the height of her fame. She was young, fierce, unapologetically bold, and one of the few female rappers who could match male MCs bar for bar. LL Cool J, already a veteran, saw something special in her, the same fiery ambition he once had when he first picked up a mic in Queens. When they collaborated on the track I Shot Ya remix alongside Keith Murray, Fat Joe, and Prodigy, it was supposed to be a moment of unity. But beneath the beats and bravado, the industry whispered. Rumors swirled that LL and Foxy's professional relationship had turned personal, too personal. Foxy, never one to hide her emotions, allegedly made comments that hinted at a closer bond. LL, who was married with children, reportedly felt cornered, fearing the headlines would twist the story into something explosive. When he distanced himself, Foxy felt publicly dismissed, humiliated even, and that humiliation soon turned to resentment. In interviews and backstage chatter, Foxy began throwing subtle shade. "Some people act like they're kings, but forget who built the throne," she said in one radio spot, a line many took as a veiled jab at LL. The comments spread like wildfire. Hip-hop media devoured it. Fans speculated endlessly. LL, known for his composure, didn't respond, not directly. But those close to him said he was furious. He respected her talent, one insider recalled, but he felt she crossed the line. LL wasn't about public drama. He believed loyalty meant silence, not spectacle. What followed was an invisible war, the kind fought with absence instead of words. LL refused to feature or acknowledge Foxy in interviews. When other artists mentioned her, he brushed it off. It wasn't cruelty. It was his way of maintaining control over a narrative that threatened to spin beyond his reach. And Foxy, meanwhile, used her platform to fire back indirectly. In her verse on Hotspot and later interviews, she spoke of fake mentors and, quote, men who preach respect but hide behind contracts. It was classic Foxy, bold, emotional, and layered with meaning. Yet underneath the fire there was pain. She had looked up to LL, even admired him. To be cast aside, without closure or conversation, left a scar. Years passed, and the feud quietly dissolved into silence. Foxy's career took turns, both triumphant and tragic, while LL evolved into a Hollywood mainstay. But every so often, fans noticed how their paths never crossed again. Award shows, tributes, anniversaries of classic hip-hop moments. Their names were never spoken in the same breath. NBY the mid-2000s, LL briefly mentioned her during an interview, choosing his words carefully. "Foxy's talented," he said. "She always was. But sometimes, growth means letting certain chapters close. It wasn't bitterness, it was closure. The kind that comes from distance, not reconciliation. NFOR Foxy, though, the sting lingered. She once said in an interview years later, "I don't hate nobody, but I remember who turned their back when I needed them most." NTHE tension between LL Cool J and Foxy Brown wasn't about ego or lyrical shots. It was about disappointment. The quiet heartbreak that happens when admiration turns to anger and respect turns to silence. And in that silence, both of them proved something about fame that few understand. In hip-hop, loyalty isn't just a word, it's a currency. Once it's broken, no verse, no apology, no reunion can ever truly buy it back.